Hi everyone. Today I'd like to draw a connection between the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer and a certain type of video game known as the action role-playing game, or ARPG for short. So examples of these games would include things like Diablo, Path of Exile, Torchlight, and various others. What typifies these games is a search for better equipment by killing monsters usually, which better equipment will then allow you to kill other more difficult monsters more quickly, to find more loot to help you do that again in an endless cycle. And this type of video game offers a very nice illustration of Schopenhauer's pessimism. So I'll say a bit about Schopenhauer's idea that we're doomed to be unsatisfied, and that he thinks that this is a fundamental feature of all things, but certainly of human life. And then I'll also try to explain why I think the ARPG offers the perfect example of Schopenhauer's pessimism. And even if he's not right about this idea in general, it certainly seems to apply to this type of video game and other things in human life. So the big question will be, is he right about this being sort of a universal feature of human life, or is it only true of some things? We'll leave that question aside for now and just focus on the example of this type of video game. So to start with Schopenhauer, Schopenhauer is a pessimist, and that doesn't mean what you might think it does initially. It doesn't mean necessarily that he was a gloomy guy, or that he always saw the bad side of things. Usually we think of pessimism as being something like that. It's a bad feature to have, typically, we think. But Schopenhauer thought that all things in the universe, and certainly in human life, are doomed to failure. So very quickly, I'll give you an example. The search for happiness, right? Everybody wants to be happy in their life. And Schopenhauer says, great, you have that desire. You go out and try and fulfill it. Well, two things can happen. Either you satisfy the desire or you don't. If you don't satisfy the desire, then clearly you've failed, right? You haven't achieved the goal, you're not happy. So that's frustration, dissatisfaction. So let's say you do achieve it. You get what you wanted that you think will make you happy. Let's say you wanted a certain job or something and you got it. Feels good for a little while, but that doesn't last very long. You don't achieve some sort of lasting state of fulfillment, according to Schopenhauer, because once you've achieved your goal, right, the desire for happiness through, say, getting this job, you quickly become bored with that. So it's no longer enough. So you search for the next thing. So that really is going to be the crux of it, and we'll see how this works out into an endless cycle in Schopenhauer's view, where you have a desire and you either have that desire frustrated or it's satisfied, but that inevitably leads to boredom and the search for something new. So a new desire takes the place of the old. You're no longer happy with the job and you search for something else. So say you want to engage in a certain kind of activity. You want to get good at surfing or something. Well, the same thing happens. Let's say you fail. You try it out and it doesn't go well. You're bad at it. It's frustrating. You never get to the point where you can just go out there and enjoy engaging in the activity. Well, that clearly sucks, right? Well, let's say that you succeed. You get what you want, and you become a good surfer, and you get to go out there. You have fun for a while, but again, according to Schopenhauer, the same thing is going to happen. You eventually become bored with that. You haven't achieved some sort of lasting state of fulfillment. And he thinks that's true of the entirety of human life. It's an endless cycle. There is no state of satisfaction that humans, or anything really, could ever achieve in life. If he's right about that, you can see why he's referred to as being a pessimist. He thinks it isn't just the case that we haven't found the right path to happiness yet, but that it's literally impossible to achieve a lasting state of happiness, at least if we understand that in terms of fulfilled desires that we might have, because there is no lasting fulfillment. It's all transitory. Well, you might see where we're going with this and why, according to Schopenhauer, video games, and especially action role-playing games, will never bring you satisfaction. We're always doomed to disappointment or boredom. So, like I described in the beginning, what is an action role-playing game all about? Well, aside from, say, playing through the story or something like that, what people who really get into these games focus on is the so-called end game, where you get to the point of trying to make your character as strong as you possibly can by finding better equipment. So how do you do this? Well, you go out and you fight monsters, typically. You kill a bunch of stuff quickly and efficiently, and you get, hopefully, better equipment. At least that's what you want. So two things can happen here. Say you're farming for one particular weapon that you want that'll make your character very strong, and you don't get it, right? You spend days, weeks trying to get this, and it just doesn't drop. You have bad luck. That feels pretty bad, right? People complain about that all the time. But let's say you get it. You go out there and say you get it on the first day. You're pretty lucky, and you're feeling good. Your character's strong. You're now better. You move up to the next difficulty level, let's say, and you get back to doing the same thing again. You're going to look for something better because you're not just happy with that one weapon that dropped. Right? We don't just sit around and say, man, this is wonderful. Look at this. I can enjoy this and finally be happy. No, it just begins again, as Schopenhauer says. You become bored with the weapon, in short. So you go out and look for something new, something even better. And again, the same thing can happen again. You either get it, in which case you'll eventually become bored, probably pretty quickly, or you don't get it, which is just frustrating. And this just goes on in an endless cycle. And if we sort of look at the sociology of gaming communities, you see this, right? Fans are constantly complaining, at least the vocal ones, about how there's nothing to do in this game. It's gotten boring. The developers are lazy. They should be coming out with more stuff. What's going on? And that's understandable from Schopenhauer's view. Of course, you're not happy with what you already have. There's no way you could be. We just don't work like that. We always need something more. We become bored and want something new. So the developers of these games can do two things, a combination of the two, or one or the other. They can make the equipment that you're looking for, the items, very, very difficult to get. So extremely low drop rates. You have to have insane luck to get what you want. Well, people complain about that, right? Because they want something and they can't get it, even if they feel like they put in a fair amount of effort. So that's very frustrating. You're unhappy. Okay, they increase the drop rates, make things more available to more people. People get what they want. They feel good for a very short amount of time. That soon passes away. And if there's nothing else to get, they're bored. And then they go and complain that, hey, there's nothing to do in this game. The alternative is the developers can try to constantly come out with new things. And that can work for a while, but it's really a losing battle, at least if we accept Schopenhauer's view of how human desire, and not just human desire, but how human desire in particular works. There's no way to satisfy it. You'll never be happy playing action role-playing games, because for Schopenhauer, you'll never be happy with anything, ultimately. But even if he's wrong about that, you can see that his account seems pretty plausible when we talk about this specific type of video game. You want more loot, you get it, now you're bored, or you don't get it, now you're mad that you didn't get it. There is no way, Schopenhauer thinks, and you've probably never met anyone like this, who just gets one thing that they wanted and just wakes up every morning and enjoys it. Says, man, look at this item I got in this video game. Isn't life wonderful? Now I am truly happy. I don't need anything more. It's just not like that, right? Even if you try, it doesn't really work that way. So, as I said before, the question is Schopenhauer right about this in general, about this pessimistic view of the world, that as human beings, we are doomed to unhappiness and dissatisfaction because there's no way to gain that lasting fulfillment? And secondly, whether or not you agree with that, is he right about the specific case as applied, or as I'm applying it, to this type of video game? So think like the game Diablo, for example. You kill a bunch of monsters, you get better loot, you kill more monsters more quickly to get better loot, and you keep going and going. And sometimes when people get into this, after a while they ask, well, what's the point? And there is no point, right? Schopenhauer would say, we're searching for something that we can't possibly get. Happiness through this satisfaction of desire, when there is no way to ultimately satisfy the desire, at least in a lasting way. The most you can get is little bursts of happiness. People talk about these little jolts of dopamine, something like that. You can get that, but that's not really fulfillment. Okay, so let me know what you think. Is Schopenhauer right? Are action role-playing games, and maybe video games in general, and maybe life in general, doomed to failure? Let me know, and I'll talk to you next time. And finally, I want to add, if you have any interest, I actually made a short little video game about Arthur Schopenhauer, both his life and some of his thought. It's called The Life of Arthur. It's available on Steam for $2. It's definitely not an ARPG. It's a story-based game with some minor puzzles. It's mostly about the characters and the story. It has some philosophical themes, so if you have any interest, I'll put a link to that in the description below. Thanks again.